The Los Angeles Times and Sacramento Bee this week cited unnamed sources saying that Brown will propose extending the variety of temporary tax hikes that are set to expire by July. How will that be received? And is that a helpful thing to do at this point, Ron?
Well, I think that's going to be received like a lead balloon, in large part because, number one, coming out and proposing extending tax hikes which were sold as temporary and saying, well, we want to extend those further, just further reinforces the reason why everyone is rightly cynical about government. When politicians from Sacramento come along and say, well, no, this tax hike is only temporary, they're not telling the truth because they know darn well that someone is going to come back down the road and say, well, we should extend those. The last thing that we need to do in California is further raise taxes and make it easier for other states' governors to lure our tax base, lure our job creators out of the state, bring them elsewhere. So raising income taxes and sales taxes and taxes on cars is a mistake. It's moving the state in the wrong direction, and it passes up a great opportunity for reform. I want to see a bold reform agenda. This is a governor who could do that. He would have the ability to get that through the legislature if he put his political capital behind it, but he's not doing that. It's disappointing.
Jess, Republicans don't like this plan.
Well, I'm not surprised. We just had 7 years of a Republican governor. They didn't like his plans either, apparently, and nor did Californians. But I do think that Jerry Brown will come forward with some major reforms to the way business is done in Sacramento. He will be reforming the state government. He's not doing it before he's even inaugurated, but he will be bringing packages to the table to change the way things are done and make much improvement in Sacramento.
What would you like to hear from the governor? He will be governor on Monday. What do you expect him to say on Monday, and then more importantly on January 10th when he's supposed to lay out that budget?
Sure. Well, I think there's two things. I mean, one, on the issue of taxes, I would like him to repeat the words of President Barack Obama, who said the worst thing you can do in a recession is raise taxes. He was definitive in that statement, and he followed that up with a sweeping piece of legislation that will keep taxes low for all Americans. And if it's good enough for President Obama, it ought to be good enough for Governor Brown. And so we need to take every effort to get our state back on track by really redefining how we operate. Let's talk about real tax reform. Not increasing taxes, but we're reforming them. How do we flatten them? How do we simplify them? How do we make them easier to comply with? Where there's special benefits for one group or the other, let's flatten those and give those to every small business and working family out there. Let's talk about real education reform. The world's changed dramatically in the last 40 years. How do we change our K-12 education system? I can't get a good answer on a dollar that leaves Sacramento. What makes it to the local school? I hear it's 60 cents, 65 cents. Why? Let's get it all to the local school. Let's talk about how the state receives and spends money. Let's talk about doing things that 20, 30, 40 years from now, people will look back and say that was bold, visionary reform that righted the ship of California. If the governor will do that, a lot of us are stand willing and able to work with him.
Ron, doesn't it all boil down to the budget, though? And on the 10th, he is going to unveil during his State of the State address what that budget will be. Some have said that if he can get a budget passed, the rest is cake for Cam in California.
Well, I don't think that's true because a budget is only a one-year financial blueprint, and it does not necessarily contain structural reforms that are seriously needed in the state. I'll give you a quick example. A big chunk of the state budget is education, 40% plus of the state budget education. That means that that's money going to K through 12 in our local school districts. And the biggest expenditure for our school district is labor costs. But yet, our local school boards have to negotiate these collective bargaining agreements with one hand tied behind their back because it's state law that governs that process, and it is completely tilted in favor of labor unions. If Jerry Brown is serious about turning more control over to local communities and our locally elected school boards, how about we level that playing field when it comes to collective bargaining? I doubt he'll do that because his labor union buddies won't allow that to happen, but that is the type of bold reform that this governor could actually do if he were serious. Give those local school boards the power to negotiate collective bargaining agreements that make sense. And if you're interested to know where your tax dollars are going, on Monday morning, call your local school district, ask for a copy of their collective bargaining agreement, and then take a look at